Here is a confession that most iPad owners will not say out loud. You have a fully kitted out iPad with the Magic Keyboard, you have the Apple Pencil, it costs you well north of $1,000, and it is just sitting there. Now maybe it's on a coffee table or it's right next to your Mac that you actually use, and for a long time, that was me. The story I told myself that it wasn't a mic problem, it was an iPad problem. Maybe it was multitasking and the fact that it was clunky, it was the file system that I wasn't used to. There are things on my MacBook that take 10 seconds for me to do, and on my iPad it took 15 or 20 seconds and 3 or 4 more taps than what it should have. So slowly, without even really deciding to, I started using the iPad like a consumption device. Productivity was for other people, but not for me. But here's the important part, it was not an iPad problem. I was wrong about what I was asking the iPad to do, and so are you. Now let me explain, because this is the most important part that people skip. When you buy a Mac, you know exactly what you are getting. It opens up, it's a computer, and it's always in full-on computer mode. Whether you're sending email or working on a spreadsheet, you are working in the same environment, same interface, same window management, same expectations. And expectations is key here because the iPad is structurally different than the Mac. And I don't mean different in the way that reviewers are like, oh, it's different because it runs iPad OS. The iPad is a tablet first. That's the foundation. It's the glass, it's the touch interface, it's the all-day battery life. It's the form factor that works in your hands, and when you kind of lose yourself in the technology, just kind of strips itself away. Everything else is an expansion layer, the Magic Keyboard, the Apple Pencil, the trackpad support that was added back in iPad OS 13.4. It doesn't transform into a Mac, it becomes a more capable iPad. That distinction sounds small, but it runs deep because it means that the iPad is the only device that Apple makes that scales in both directions. All the way down to pure tablet, just the glass in your hands, and back towards a focused work machine without ever losing what it is at its core. Now, my problem is that I used to think that this made the iPad a lesser device, and the truth is, I had it completely backwards. Now, if you want to find out how I stay productive across all this, stick around because I've got a framework that will show you exactly when to pick up the iPad and when not to. Now, let me address the thing that so many of you are rage typing in the comments right now. It is multitasking. Because if you've spent any amount of real time with the iPad, you've almost certainly hit a wall when trying to do any type of real work. You wanted 2 apps side by side, you tapped around a little bit longer than you'd like to admit, but what you got was almost right. It was close enough to be annoying, not close enough to where you actually could do any work, so you put your iPad down and you went back to your Mac. That's real and I am not dismissing it. But here's the reframe. That frustration you feel when iPadOS cannot do something that macOS does is you asking a device to do something that it's not designed to do. You're not hitting a system limitation, you're hitting a design boundary on purpose. The iPad's multitasking is limited compared to what it is on a Mac. That is a feature for some and a limitation for others. If you need 6 windows open across 2 different monitors and a full file system where you can navigate the command line, honestly, buy a Mac. The iPad is not designed for that and you shouldn't want it to be. But if what you actually need is focused single context work, 1 app, 1 task, minimal friction, the constraint is actually working in your favor. You're not fighting the interface, you are actually working with it. So if we put this in another way, the greatest weakness for the iPad is actually its greatest strength in a different context. Now here's where I want to flip the entire conversation, guys. The question everybody asks is, can the iPad replace a Mac? And Apple's been trying to win that argument for over a decade. More RAM, that M4 chip now sits on a device that runs iPadOS. Well, they keep saying yes. The internet keeps saying, not exactly. But that's the wrong argument to think about. I'm not asking if the iPad can replace every Mac. I'm asking if it can replace yours. Because when you actually audit your real laptop usage, not like edge cases, not, worst case scenarios, what you're doing on a Tuesday, most people are not in Final Cut Pro editing a multicam video. They're not in Xcode making an app. They're in email, they're in notes, they have 5 or 6 tabs open in their browser, they need to mark up a document, they need to reorganize their calendar. The iPad handles each one of those use cases, not as a workaround, not as a compromise, natively, cleanly, and in a form factor that your MacBook literally cannot replace. So when I say that your MacBook cannot replicate it, I mean that specifically. There's no version of the MacBook today that works as a tablet. Maybe there's gonna be a MacBook Ultra in the near future, but today that does not exist. And that's a real capability difference. And it runs in the iPad's favor for a larger slice of what most people's day looks like, and probably even what they care to admit. And stick around because I'm gonna show you exactly what this looks like from an actual workflow next. All right, so it's the weekend and you just want to read some articles that you saved throughout the week and you don't necessarily have an agenda. You're not pulling out your MacBook Pro for that. And your iPhone might be fine for 5-10 minutes, but the screen size is going to start to feel small. With the iPad with no keyboard, just the glass, the device disappears into exactly what you are doing. Otherwise, it's 90 minutes before your next call. You open your inbox, you have a draft with some talking points, you clip on your Magic Keyboard for $300, and it's also your case and your stand. You will have a keyboard, a trackpad, and a focused work environment. One app at a time, no second window, nothing to drift into. That constraint is not a missing feature. It is something as intentional design, and once you stop fighting it, it's actually going to be useful. Same device, two completely different contexts. You didn't switch devices, you just switch modes. Now that is what I would call conformability, the ability for the device to reshape itself around what you need and when you need it. The iPad doesn't need to be a laptop replacement. It simply needs to replace your laptop for the sessions where your laptop was never fully optimized for that task in the first place. And there's no other device in Apple's lineup that does that. Now get subscribed if that reframing of your iPad resonated with you, because there's more content just like this to make you get more from your Apple devices. So here's the framework that actually changed how I approach using every device that I own. The idea is simple: match the device and the session length, not the task category. If you have under 15 minutes, iPhone for me is a perfect win. I'm not opening up a full display on my Mac here or my iPad, going for a quick reply in email if I need to find something in the internet. That just to me does not make sense. The iPhone is fast, it's frictionless, it wins every single time. If I have 15 to 60 minutes of time available, it's going to be the iPad. This is the window for the device that was built for, in my opinion, long enough that the iPhone screen starts to feel like a nuisance, and short enough where you don't actually need an external display or a desktop environment to get real work done. Focus, single context work, writing emails, reviewing, annotating. This is where the iPad really shines. It stops living on the couch and earns a spot on your desk. Now, if it's 60 minutes or more, it's going to be the Mac. This is where complexity, multiple windows, extended creative sessions, full environment for full work. This is what you want. Now, those are the thresholds that I use. You might shift depending on what you're doing. The point is that it's not about the exact numbers. The point is that once you have a mental model for how you approach work and how you start using the iPad, it stops being a device that you're unsure how to use it. It becomes the one that you reach for automatically because you understand how much time that you have available and the type of work that you want to accomplish. Okay, here's the one thing I want to leave you with, especially if you are feeling in limbo about owning an iPad. You have an iPad, you're not really sure if it's the right call, you want to use it more, but you keep defaulting to your Mac for everyday situations. I would tell you, don't change the device, change the question that you're asking. It's not what can my iPad do that my Mac can't. It's actually what can my iPad do that my Mac cannot? Where does it fit more naturally in your life? Because for most people, the average workday is exactly what the iPad was built for. Email, calendar, web browsing, marking of documents, photos, sharing, things like that. That is where the iPad excels. And because it's conformable and it can expand up and down, it is perfect for a number of scenarios where you might not think about it naturally. The constraint is not the ceiling, it's the floor, and the floor is actually really good. Now drop a comment and tell me, how do you actually use the iPad on a daily basis? Not how you plan to use it when you bought it, but how do you use it now? Where does it earn a spot in your day-to-day workflow? And actually tell me where it falls short. I read every single one of these comments. If this reframe helped you, like the video, and if you want to get more, consider subscribing. My name is Mike, guys, and I am out of here.